Thursday morning. We good? Bill, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Doing good. All right, Billy. So now that the class of 2024 is officially in the books for LSU and the rest of college football, all sights and focus turns towards this class of 2025 that is very highly anticipated. We had Keelan Moses in studio last week. We all know, very impressive, both young man and football player. And he speaks of this class like it's going to be, one of those, the fam, the classes that we all talk about now a couple of years removed, Leonard and Jamal Adams and that crew. How special is this class looking now that we're about a year out?
Yeah, it's looking pretty special. I mean, just starting off with a guy like Keelan, who's just an incredible recruiter, always been one of my favorite prospects in the class of 2025 with just how hard he recruits for LSU. And even before he committed, he was always just so, easy to catch up with, but easy in the sense that you could tell he was passionate about LSU and the future of what they were pushing and pitching to him. And so for him to get on board there in November was important because this is now that stretch in January into February and March and later into the summer where a lot of these prospects are around each other a lot on a national level and not just the state of Louisiana, where they're at camps, they're at 7-on-7, they're taking visits. And so it's important for guys that, are committed to be able to pitch, those opportunities to the guys that they see in their classes. And so Keelan was a big piece to get on board for that reason. But this 2025 class does have the chance to be historic. Not many programs over the course of modern recruiting can say that they have the number one quarterback, number one wide receiver, and number one running back, and one of them is the number one overall player, and they're all 5 stars. So this class is off to a historic start, and it's going to be fun to follow.
Billy, I don't want to get Keelan lost into like one of these mouthpieces of a member of the class. I think we're going to look up 3 or 4 years from now, and he might be one of the top players that comes out of this class. Where are they going to use him?
Yeah, I think they're going to use him at linebacker, and his will still has a whole another year to develop before he'll be hitting the college level, and so he'll be able to just kind of continue to develop that frame and show things on the field where they'll get a better idea of whether that's Will or Mike. But I mean, he's kind of a big kid already, so It wouldn't shock me if he was more of that Mike true middle linebacker for Blake Baker.
Yeah, Stewie, who's pretty dialed into recruiting, was a little surprised at how big he's gotten.
He since the last time we saw him.
Yeah, he's a good-looking prospect, and he does it all for UI, and that's one of the things that when you evaluate linebackers you like to see is a little bit of playing both ways. You look back at Devin White and Patrick Queen. Those were really good indicators for those guys. Devon Keys in the 2024 class, Tylen Singleton, Xavier Adkins dabbled in it. So those are just some of the examples lately. I mean, it's a good indicator when they can truly do it all.
Billy, what's the emphasis right now for recruiting personnel inside of college football programs right now? Now that you've got classes pretty much tucked in for 2024 and the focus is on 2025, how are you gearing up for that? What's the push to the transfer portal that's about to pop open in the spring? We talk about these new schedules that coaches are on and how demanding they are. At what part of the process are they in now?
Probably the calmest, I would say.
Yeah.
Outside of the fact that there's a couple changes. LSU did hire Preston Tiffany from Ole Miss yesterday to join Austin Thomas's staff. So he's kind of building out the recruiting department and things like that. But there are some of those changes happening with the recruiting staffs around the country. But in terms of portal moving and shaking, that is more of you're just kind of keeping your ear to the ground, and then now you're kind of making sure you're teeing up the visits that you want to happen for spring practice. So a lot of just kind of working the phones, texting, things like that with prospects and their families to get those lined up for the spring. And even in some cases, you can maybe get some official visits locked in. So it's a lot of just working the phones and also just finalizing those big boards so that when these prospects do visit campus, and if somebody wants to commit, you can either navigate that the right way if maybe you want them to hold off a little bit more, or you can be ready to say, okay, that's our number one offensive tackle. We're ready to roll. Let's get him on board, or things like that. So it's kind of refining right now, and then in spring ball they'll host guys and they'll get to see more prospects of the national type for the most part come to campus, and then when they get into the eval period later this spring, the high school ranks, they'll get another opportunity to reshuffle their board.
A couple of great reads and listens right now over at the Bengal Tiger. If you want to check it out at on3.com/Bengal Tiger to catch up with the latest. Bill, last time we talked to you, we were talking about the commitment of Jabari Antoine and how big that was, the state's number 2 overall prospect in the class of 2025, and a big member of the big board for LSU in that class. Corey Raymond paying early dividends. Some other DBs on the board include DJ Pickett, who's a 5-star, and Dorian Brew, who is a 4-star. Where does LSU sit with those guys at this point?
Yeah, DJ Pickett is listed as the number 1 safety in the country and a top 10 overall prospect. And LSU knocked it out of the park with his unofficial visit last month. Corey Raymond got him right to campus. He was a guy that Corey's been recruiting since he was at Florida, but the Gators just couldn't get as much traction. There's some folks, following his recruitment that think that he probably ends up going out of the state of Florida, kind of spread his wings a little bit. Miami's the only school that's in state that's in his top 5 right now, but LSU has made a major move there. And if he were to commit right now, LSU would be sitting in a pretty darn good spot to get him. Michigan's had some buzz. Miami has a little bit of buzz, but those 3 with LSU, for some people sitting at the top for DJ Pickett. We'll see how it all plays out as he finalizes visits and gets closer to a decision, but they're pressing all the right buttons now with him. Dorian Brew is the son of Derek Brew, former LSU track legend, Olympian, and so he's out of the Houston area. This one's kind of shaping up to be an LSU-Texas battle. Ohio State had some buzz early on, but he ended up pushing back his decision, and now LSU has hosted him already, and that has been able, to allow them to get a little bit more footing in the recruitment now that Corey's here. He was a prospect that they kicked the tires on, tried to get in there, but at that point he was really considered a heavy Ohio State lean, where his mom is in the track Hall of Fame and I believe she still lives up there. So he's got the track accolades in his family for sure, and he's good in his own right in that respect, but he's also a really good DB prospect. So those 2 are very much guys for LSU fans to know in terms of recruiting.
Bo Davis is another big name that was a splash in the offseason for LSU as far as additions to the staff. He has made some ripples on the recruiting path here since being in Baton Rouge, including going up to North Louisiana and offering a big defensive lineman out of Ouachita Parish and Dylan Berryman. What can you tell me about Berryman out of the 318?
Yeah, Dylan is a really impressive prospect out there, and LSU has done this the right way. I mean, obviously they changed coaching staffs and things like that on the defensive side, but to really know your board and be ready to offer a 2026 defensive lineman when the state has Jakeem Stewart in it, that is knowing that this guy's going to turn into a really good prospect on the defensive line. Ed Nakar also has Richard Anderson. Lamar Brown plays a little defensive line. Darius McKinley is in the class. So for them to move on him, that just shows, I think, how good of a prospect he can be. He's about 6'3", 295 pounds, and we've seen Baylor, UTSA, a couple other schools make their move early on. I think he's going to be one of the more highly recruited prospects in the state, and LSU got in on him early, so you've got to feel good about where things stand. He's a big plug in the middle for that defense, and just a really powerful guy. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Jacoby and Guillory from the high school level.
Yeah, you mentioned and that 2026 defensive line group is stacked, which is headlined by Jakeem Stewart, the number 1 overall prospect. They've only handed out 1 defensive line offer in the 25 in the state of Louisiana, and that's to Ed Nakar's Corey Adams. What's the class look like in state for 25 outside of Adams, and what's up on Adams?
Yeah, Corey Adams is a really good prospect that I think LSU's a clear-cut leader for. He's out of Carr, and Carr kids with Frank Wilson on staff. They sit in a pretty good spot with that program, and so I would expect at some point when he decides to narrow things down, make a decision that LSU would be the pick. He's kind of a jumbo edge, could be a strong side defensive end in Blake Baker's defense. And then as far as the rest of the in-state class, I think two guys or a trio, I guess I should say, that are standing out right now is Rashad Sterling from Lutcher. He's a really good prospect that has some SEC and Power 5 interest and offers on the table. And then Devon Oliver out of Parkway in Bossier City is another prospect that is really blowing up. And then Homa's Tyrone Winslow is a big, massive defensive tackle who is really picking up some interest. Houston, Missouri, those programs jumped into the mix there. I would say those are the three that, at least as of now, you kind of watch for LSU to start picking up interest in and potentially offering. But Rashad Sterling is the one that I feel like at this point might be closest to the offer.
What about DK Mays,
Billy?
DK Mays?
Billy, DK Mays, Stewie's asking. I don't know if you could hear Stewie.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard me, but
what did he say?
What about DK Mays?
He's asking you about DK Mays
Central.
From Central.
Oh, yeah. Yep. DK Mays is an interesting edge prospect out of Central. He picked up a lot of big offers over the course of the fall. Texas A&M, Mississippi State, some other programs jumped into the mix there. Another big prospect, and they're, I think, just kind of in wait-and-see mode with him and as far as what they're going to do with him. Another one to keep an eye on is Dutchtown's Joshua Lewis, a big edge who camped at LSU last summer, impressive on the hoof, has an SEC offer from Missouri as well. So those are a couple more in-state guys at the edge position that they could go after, and we'll see. I think it's a pretty good edge class in Louisiana next cycle, so it wouldn't shock me if we saw those guys get offered.
Bill, how about the running back spot? Obviously, LSU's already got Harlem Berry committed to the class, and there's another top 10 prospect nationally that's out there, again, from North Louisiana, in James Simon. Obviously, this is Frank Wilson recruiting a Louisiana running back in the state. You have to feel good about that if you're LSU, but where do they stand?
Yeah, a lot of people, whoever you talk to feels like LSU is sitting in the prime position to land James Simon, the number 2 running back in Louisiana, a top 150 prospect, a top 10 running back in the country, number 3 Louisiana prospect for on 3. LSU's probably battling Texas A&M here for the most part, I would say, but I think LSU is the clear-cut leader here and has been for a while. I put my pick in over the summer. There's a lot of programs that are gunning for him, and LSU has got a lot of ties between Frank Wilson and Sherman Wilson. Both have known the family for a long time. When Sherman Wilson was at Memphis, he was on staff with his dad, John. So there's a lot of ties that go back a while, and James Simon has been being recruited by LSU for a long, long time now, too. So I think he's somebody that LSU sits in a great spot for, and they just got to push it across the finish line.
Bill, one more before we get you out of here. LSU is looking at the potential of crossing over a couple of guys for spring practice in cross-training offensive line to defensive line. Kelly alluded a bit to it in his post-signing day wrap-up. Is there anybody that pops to mind for you? You covered these guys in recruiting and saw them play a lot of, kind of offense and defensive line. Is there anything or anyone that may jump that we could speculate about?
I don't know about
Tyree Adams' names comes up. Does that make sense?
So I think Tyree has done an unreal job being the guy who's going to take over for Will Campbell and is okay with that. That's my only thing there. And I've heard a lot of rave reviews about that. His body type, he's one of those like a Mason Smith who could have played offensive tackle or defensive tackle. But I've heard enough good things about Tyree Adams and how he approaches everything with Brad Davis that that one would surprise me if he did. Maybe one that would be interesting from an athletic perspective would be a Paul Mabenga, maybe. But he's so young, and they were really high on him coming out of Buford. So do you make that switch and just start kind of mucking up some development for guys you were high on just, a year ago. So those are two guys that are interesting from an athletic perspective, but I think we're probably going to see more maybe walk-on types that move over and get a chance to maybe show their stuff.
I agree, because I can't imagine that Brad Davis would be a big fan of that. I mean,
no, he likes his offensive lineman. He works hard for
That's
him.
right. All the work he's put in. Bill, thank you. Keep up the good work. We'll touch base soon.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, there.